Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us again today for this series. My name is Clara Bocchino, and I'm the coordinator for the Big Data Analytics and Transboundary Water Collaboration for Southern Africa, which is the umbrella entity under which we have this series of webinars supported by the Sustainable Water Partnership and the IUCN Global Water Programme. Today, we welcome Tariro Salucera from the IUCN Eastern Southern African office based in Pretoria, South Africa, who's going to talk to us about water governance in Southern Africa. Before I introduce Tariro to you and I give him the word, I would just like to remind you to please keep your microphone on mute during the presentation. Tariro will have some breaks during the presentation to ask for comments, for clarifications, or just to share experiences. But if you have something that you really want to pin down and not forget about, you can use the comment box or the question box to share them with us, and then we'll pick them up whilst we do the break or at the end of the session. So use the chat or use the question tool. And also, whilst we are having a discussion with all of you during the breaks or at the end, you are welcome to make an intervention on a specific topic by raising your hand, sorry, in the panel. And then I will give you the possibility to make your intervention as soon as the current speaker or participant is finished with his discussion. So without much further ado, let me introduce to you Tariro. Tariro is based, like I said, at the IUCN Pretoria office. He has a wealth of experience with several institutions working for water and water governance at the International Water Management Institute, at the Food and Agriculture Organization, and also with the World Bank. He has a master's degree in integrated water resource management, but is also currently reading for a doctorate in water governance. So without much further ado, let me introduce you to Tariro. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Clara. Good morning and good afternoon, and I suppose this was a good evening since we are all in different time zones. So it's great, to catch up with you again on this, and we have been talking in this series since I think this is what, third or fourth week now. So I hope you can hear me legibly. I'm speaking with you from Pretoria, and let me just quickly go to my screen here. Hi, Clara.
Tariro, can you see the invitation to share your screen?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm just trying to make sure that let me know if you can hear me, because there are two connections that I'm trying to play with. You can hear me right now, right?
We can hear you, but we don't see your screen.
Okay. You can see my screen?
Not yet. Let me try again.
Okay, send the invitation again.
Yes, I'm going to try now. Can you see the invitation now?
Yes.
Okay. Just please go on display settings and swap the view, because we can see only the presenter mode commenting.
Is it showing in the correct mode?
Please go on display settings on the top bar in the middle. Yeah, and swap presenter view and slideshow.
Okay, for some reason that link is not allowing me to do that. Wait.
Maybe end the slideshow. And then go on the bottom bar. Oh, that's perfect. Perfect.
So this way is working.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Now you are set. Colleagues, we are greeting you from a very sunny Pretoria, and things are looking up. We are very positive. We're just end of winter, and it's also looking like this is the end of the, well, maybe not the very end, but at least the coronavirus pandemic is sparing us a lot. We came from a peak period where we had close to 13,000 new cases a day to less than 1,000 a day this week. So we are very upbeat, and so am I. And since we've been learning a lot about water governance, beginning with the first webinar that was given by my colleague Alejandro, today I'm here just to give you a regional overview of water governance in Southern Africa. So I understand that I have a lot of colleagues from the region in this webinar. Welcome. This is a region that is, full of experts in water and water governance. So let's make this very interactive, and looking forward to a very, a warm and collaborative chat. So let me begin here by just giving you a context. I'm sure some of you may have heard, whether it's in history about the term, look at distances. I mean, when historians refer to African countries in general, this is a result of, the events that led to the boundaries that, that govern Africa's states today. Africa was divided, over a conference in Berlin, that is in Germany around 1884-85. So, the parties to that conference were sitting over a map, allocating each other a piece of the continent. This then became known as Scramble for Africa. I'm bringing this up because it's important in the way we end up with the kind of water governance structures that we do in the region. Because this Scramble for Africa happened without due consideration to a lot of things, including, the natural and topographical features that you find now being divided over 2 or more states. So Africa is not really made up of nation states like you do find, for example, in Europe, where you know that, for example, the French, the Spanish, and Spain. In Africa, the Venda in South Africa and in Mozambique and in Zimbabwe, and the Chewa in Zambia and in Malawi and in Tanzania and so forth. So it's a very interesting scenario that actually affected several things, including, the kind of education that was bequeathed to the independent states when democracy took over, when these states of Africa became independent. So you do get countries that inherited a lot of, differences in education, legal frameworks, and even basic metrics. For example, in Southern Africa, you find Zimbabwe and Zambia, British colonies, Mozambique and Angola are Portuguese colonies. And Zimbabwe and Mozambique are next to each other. They have a very long history of cordial relations. Yet, when they need to cooperate on anything, a lot of harmonization is needed, right from the translations in languages to other things. So by doing this, there are 2 things that I want to come out of this context. The first one is that this Scramble for Africa created a very, a lot of transboundary situations, transboundary river basins, because boundaries were drawn as and when they became convenient to the colonial parties. So you do have a country, in Southern Africa, in fact, for the whole of Africa, you are not going to find any country that does not have, at least a transboundary basin, some with as much as 8. And in Southern Africa, you're looking at between 3 and 5 basins on average for each country. So this also, this conference, besides creating this transboundary situation, it may also have created, unwittingly, of course, or rather it may have actually laid grounds for water cooperation that we now find today. But I'll get to that point later. I just want to give you a trajectory of the water governance in the region to begin with, before I actually come to the water governance at a transboundary scale that we find in the region. So I just divided this in three. I just first want to discuss the indigenous traditional before I come to the colonial one and present state, which are during the post-colonial or demand-driven era that is really based on IWRM approach, the integrated water resources management approach that is really taken root in the region. So by the indigenous traditional era, I am talking about the period before colonial powers set foot in Africa. I always like to start beginning. Much of the history that is shared or the academic research that happens in the region mostly looks at governance from the time recorded history. And because of this, something is lost a lot in terms of what was happening. How did you actually look at water in the region before someone wrote about it? So I'm in this, I'm speaking to you, from an informed position, informed by two things. One, the scant research that is available, and two, having grown up in the region and being party to the communal systems that actually persist, so most of them up to date. Water is mostly regarded as a common pool resource, together with your indigenous forests and land in the communal villages that you find in most of rural Africa. And access to these resources is informed by customary rules. And there are a lot of religious values that govern, these are the traditional values and access. That now carry some traditional legal authority that is exercised mostly by the village heads, or what we call the headmen. The water is actually viewed as a living entity, and you find this in most Bantu societies, all the way from Tanzania coming all the way down here to South Africa, where there are certain sacred rights that are accorded to water, and there are things you cannot do, for example, in a river course. And then the activities that are actually governed by certain periods, of the calendar. I'll give you just a few examples. If you go to rural Zimbabwe, if you go to rural Zambia, you do find that, for example, there's a specific time. If you own, a head of cows, at what time do you water the cows? Do you drive them to the river to drink? And how does this relate to other uses, like people who actually farm small gardens for nutrition and food security along the river systems? These are also the rivers where laundry happens. People also take baths here. So in as much as there's no actual written rules somewhere, you'll be very surprised to see how these water uses function so seamlessly at a community level. And to an uninformed eye, you would think that there's some kind of control, someone is standing somewhere behind a curtain with a book giving people orders, but not at all. These are informed by customary law, and there is a lot of incentives and carrots and sticks that come with the disobedience. So the ownership of water and how it is used never really rested in with anyone. You didn't build a dam and say, I own this amount of water. So you will find, as we go through this discussion, that some of these values have actually found their way to present day demand-driven approaches, and that might also be a reason why some of the provisions of IWRM were very easily taken up here, because they were consistent with what was already happening in the region. So when colonialism came then, it kind of drastically altered this by bringing in the issue of ownership, titled ownership of water and related resources, including land. So there was, from the 19th century, there's what is normally referred to as the this era came with a lot of civil engineering and industrial development and irrigated commercial agriculture that accompanied colonialism. Focus was on development. So the supply side of water got attention. The idea was, conquering nature, what others really call creating an irrigated Eden. When you look at the size of the commercial agriculture that went in a lot of the mainland states. So powerful state bureaucracies were created. I remember you'd find, for example, between Zimbabwe and Zambia, the Central Africa Power Corporation was created around 1963, which was actually mandated with building Kariba dams, shared by both countries and a huge source of hydropower up to date. Kawara Bassa was built in Mozambique, and it was built by an agreement with between the Portuguese colonial power actually and the South African government. In South Africa down here, we have the TCTA, which came late into the century, and that went about creating one of the then miracles of civil engineering, bringing in water from Lesotho into South Africa's commercial heartland of Gauteng. So here in Pretoria and around Joburg, we actually use water from Lesotho. So this era brought title to the ownership and created of water and created a very skewed and inequitable water consumption paradigm where most of the commercial interests had water and owned license to exploit and use water resources, much to the disadvantage of a lot of the traditional and communal setups that did not have much say in how this was done. And bearing in mind that we're also dealing with governments that were not democratic then. So this era saw a long stretch of consumptive water uses that drastically changed the face of the continent and the landscapes sprouting up of urban areas, mines, towns, agricultural enterprises, and so forth. Then coming into the 1990s, the supply-oriented paradigms came in. They were very much influenced by the Dublin principles and the onset of IWM. You listened to Alejandro's, he gave a lot of this background principles and how they affected much of the, or rather how they informed the IWM. Other geopolitical factors also came into play because as African states were getting more and more independent, they got a lot of the political backing from the East. And when the Soviet Union fell, a lot of the support that was coming to the states from that side switched, and the states, focused now on the West, and a lot of donor aid, a lot of capacity development initiatives started actually coming in from the West, and this coincided now with the IWM era, because you see later in the discussion how a lot of the international cooperating partners really facilitated the development, of IWM in the region by building capacity, providing financial support and so forth. So much of the macroeconomic policies that you found in governments really began to take a market-based liberal approach as opposed to this socialist, communist basis that they used before, that was inclined to the Eastern ideologies. So there's a lot of scaling back of government, which means what was spent on social services, what was spent on provision of basics, including water, was really now going into the hands of autonomous institutions that were being created to create some kind of efficiency around government. So you began to find some new authorities, being in charge of example water. And if I can give some examples, you'll find the Zimbabwe National Water Authority, you'll find the regional water administrations, the others in Mozambique. And this happened slightly late in South Africa, where you begin to find the catchment councils and so forth, where they're supposed to be autonomous and run independent of central government. So the promotion of structural adjustment brought this up. And water was really promoted as an economic good, or rather the approach to managing water was now really based on water as an economic good, shifting focus away from just provision to people on a state largest approach, if I may use the word. So the approach that began using economic incentives to increase water efficiency. So the IWM reforms just at the national level, saw a lot of change in policies and legislation. You begin to see, new national water policies across the region in Mozambique, in Zambia, in South Africa, in Malawi. And, this was also the time when the ownership of water was then reclarified, going back to, what I mentioned earlier is what we had in the, indigenous situation, in the indigenous era. I like the South African constitution on this one because it really clarifies this, in a more explicit way, where ownership of water now rests with the state, and then a minister actually holds this in trust, and you begin to see the use of water, being licensed according to the commercial use that is being applied for, and of course, some of the natural rights and people's rights, on water being protected by what they call in South Africa, for example, Schedule 1 water uses. And this, brought a lot of, plurality in terms of the people and the stakeholders that are party to any water course, because basin planning became a lot more participatory than before. The idea now shifted to be demand-led. So water institutions got decentralized to the lowest possible users to create platforms for key stakeholder participation. And this is what we now found in catchment councils, sub-catchment councils, or water user associations across the region. So this is where we now find ourselves with, in terms of, water governance at national level. And a lot of partners, the international cooperating partners that are called ICPs, were involved in helping this. There was a lot of money that came into the region from, organizations like your Swedish Development Agency, SIDA, AFDB, that is African Development Bank, GIZ, that's the Germans, World Bank, the Dutch, and so forth. So this helped in terms of capacity building, in terms of establishing these new institutions. And from the 1990s coming up to now, this is more or less what we have. And at an international level, IWM really focused on promoting water cooperation. So we really had a very interesting phase where shared river basins now had to sign some kind of treaties. Some may refer to them in using different languages. So this was to create platforms for cooperation and joint water uses, and some kind of harmonization of national laws in order to meet the IWM approach of a basin-wide management approach. So the regional frameworks through SADC also got established in this era. So what is interesting is that there's a very interesting interplay between SADC, the regional body, and what is obtaining in the river basin organizations of the shared water courses, but I'll come to that shortly. So the promotion of a benefit sharing and joint basin planning is really now what drives water cooperation in the region. And some of the biggest water courses or catchment areas, including Okavango, the Limpopo, the Zambezi, were the earliest to sign these treaties. And this worked in a very interesting way in that first states sign treaties, then from there, a river basin organization is built. Then at the end, you have a secretariat that coordinates the work that goes on in the river basin. So in a nutshell, this is the kind of background that informs what we have in the region currently. So before I go into the specifics of what we find to transport, I just want to pose for questions. What is important to reflect at this point is that IWRM as an approach has really taken root in the region, and you find it being practiced to varying degrees of perfection across the Southern Africa region. And the region itself is a huge beneficiary of a lot of support that came from the international cooperating partners to promote IWRM, and this set the stage for water cooperation in the region. And I pause for any points of clarity or questions now before I go into the transboundary governance slot.
Thank you very much, Tariro. That was a very interesting historical review of how even just the perception of water in Southern Africa changed. I remember when I was researching for my PhD, I remember thinking that one of the biggest changes brought about by the colonizing powers was that waters became changed from being a gathering point for communities, because of course where there is water there is life, to become a boundary, because it was an easy demarcation on the ground. And of course when you're trying to divide a territory that is mostly unknown, you look for those natural boundaries like mountains and rivers that can create that sort of easy division. And I also remember thinking, I wonder how different it would have been if instead of being considered as boundaries, they would have been still, even in the colonial time, conceived as points of contact and points of interaction. So that took me back to my studies as well, so many years ago. It tells you when we talk about natural resources, there is really not much of a sort of boundaries in that respect either. So thank you very much for that, and thank you for having taken us to where we're at now, and the multiple roles that national governments and international agencies are playing in supporting an integrated approach for water governance in the region. I don't see any comments or questions from our participants, but if somebody would like to contribute to this historical review that Tariro has just given us, or to ask any points of clarifications, you're very welcome to raise your hand now. If I don't see anything coming up, then I think you're good to go ahead for the next session, and then I'm sure there will be more interactions once we get into the functionalities of transboundary governance in Southern Africa. I think that seems to be the case. I don't see any raised hands. Okay, thank you, Tariro. The floor is yours.
I hope that the lack of questions is because people understand it very well, not because they are confused by anything. Okay.
Put your microphone close to your mouth, because the volume fluctuates and sometimes we cannot. Yeah, so I think that would work better so it doesn't fluctuate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now I come to transboundary water governance in Southern Africa. I'll just give you a highlight of the key issues, the role that SADC plays, and the enabling framework that is there, and then give him, a better nuance of the key partners that have been seeing SADC. Now, just an overview of the key, issues that we find ourselves with in the basin. The Southern Africa region, is home to some 15 major basins that cover over 70% of the land, and way more than 30 shared aquifers. It's just that the groundwater knowledge is still growing and the mapping is still going on. But if there's someone from the Groundwater Management Institute, I'm sure they have the more accurate number at present. Most of the states are really in a water scarce situation, and some are worse than others. But the region in general, going into 2040 to 2050, is one of those that have been highlighted to be in serious levels of water stress. Anyone familiar with the region, you know that in countries like Namibia and Botswana and South Africa, a huge part of the drylands experience desertification. Actually, we have a region that is really victim to a lot of weather extremes. A lot of drought is experienced. At the same time, we also find a lot of floods. There is a huge rural population in the region. This is important to realize because in as much as we talk about shared basins, you are still dealing with people who live in the basin that live within a certain community and do not really understand or have this perception that we are living in a transboundary basin, and the other people upstream or downstream. We are looking at people who are not in a very water secure situation that still really have to work hard, to earn their livelihoods. It's a region that has a lot of, consumptive water uses because of, an expansion of a lot of commercial uses, including irrigation. If you look like at the Zambezi watercourse, the planned irrigation among the 8 countries that share the watercourse so far is more than 100,000 hectares. There's a lot of mining going on. There's a lot of industrial growth and urbanization, which not only consume a lot of water, but also really pollute the existing water resources and make, or rather render some of the water unfit for other purposes after they've been used in industries or in mines. So this is just among other issues. Colleagues from the region can testify that we have a lot more issues than this, but I'm just giving you, just the highlights here. So where does now SADC come in? I think one of them, if you compare across Africa, one of the very important roles that SADC plays is in the governance of natural resources. Colleagues from out of the region, SADC is a regional body, a political economic body that consists of 16 member states in Southern Africa. So SADC stands for Southern Africa Development Community. So the SADC Secretariat is based in Botswana and Gaborone, and it has a dedicated water division that takes the responsibility actually of overseeing the shared water courses in the region. So this is important to understand. At the regional level, SADC has an organ that oversees water cooperation. And to do this, several instruments were crafted to enable this oversight to be useful. These include the protocol on shared water courses, the regional water policy, and planning documents, including the regional water strategy and the regional strategic action plan, which gets updated every 5 years. So I just want to have a brief overview on 2 of these, that is the protocol and the water policy. So the SADC Treaty of 1992, which declared a shared future, peaceful economic in the region, set the tone for this, because you don't find this cooperation only in water. You also find it in energy, you find it in agriculture, environment, change and so forth. So you all have these subunits sitting within the SADC secretariat. So the protocol on shared water courses was first crafted in 1995. Then it was revised in 2000. After the UN Convention on the law of non-navigable use of the national water courses came into play. So the revised version had to take some of the provisions into account. What is interesting and rather very important to note is that this protocol is a binding legal agreement. So in all countries that share water courses that have ratified this protocol, this is a very important step that actually enforces them to observe the dictates of this protocol. So the protocol itself establishes principles of water cooperation, including but not limited to decision-making, dispute resolution, shared information, and monitoring. So you find this happening in your shared basins, also to varying levels of perfection, as most of these are still developing. But the protocol gives this legal mandate to the SADC Water Division for supervising the RBOs and of regularly being in contact with key stakeholders in the development and revision of the RESAPs. We call them the RESAPs, the Regional Strategic Action Plan. In fact, we are just at the tail end of the fourth one, and coming into 2021, SADC will have a fifth Regional Strategic Action Plan. The Regional Water Policy, which came in 2005, is rather a guidance document on the implementation of the protocol. So it has a lot of recommendations when it comes to catchment-based water management, principles, and it really, makes a strong recommendation on the establishment of shared water course institutions. So this is what I was mentioning earlier, that in a river like Limpopo, in a river like the Orange, you sign the two or more states that share the river first sign a treaty that gives an indication of the willingness to cooperate, and from there, then a river basin organization is built. So you have these recommendations in this water policy, and it, there is this strong recommendation of a treaty and RBO and the secretariat. Although now, because of the different sizes and economic importance of the basins, you don't find a secretariat in each and every one of them yet, although there are a lot of plans to make sure that this is uniform across the basin. So we have varying levels of cooperation where other basins have an RBO and the secretariat, others have some kind of committee, like you find in the basins like in the Ngomati, like shared by South Africa, Eswatini, Mozambique, like in Kunene, shared by Namibia and Angola, like in the Ruvuma, shared by Tanzania and Mozambique. There is actually some interesting debate about what form of cooperation is the best. And I think there's a 2011 paper from Jonathan Louds from IMI on this, where there was some kind of revision and assessment of the forms of cooperation. And I also wrote a paper, I think you find that in the Water Policy 2016, where I made a comparison of these different forms of cooperation within the SADC region. But we don't have time to go into that. I just want to give you the importance of the oversight that was created and how the policy works. So the regional water strategy is actually informed by the water policy and helps shared water courses in to implement cooperation and identify areas that need capacity. So some key partners have been, very crucial in this journey to start realizing this. One of them being the Global Water Partnership, which is a funding partner up to now. Its technical advisory committee played a big role in supporting the implementation of IWM among the states, and up to now, SADC convenes a lot of events with the Global Water Partnership. We also have WaterNet, which is a regional grouping of key stakeholders, including academic institutions, research institutions, governments, and other key stakeholders who are practitioners in the water sector to implement capacity building programs through training, research, and demonstrations. And again, a lot of support that came into WaterNet was from the Dutch, from Sweden, and so forth. Currently now, UCN, we are also working a lot with SADC, and we are an implementing partner. And our task, among others, is environmental water management, and we also do other things with SADC, including transfrontier conservation. Lately, we have the SADC Groundwater Management Institute. That is an affiliate. I think they're in the process of completing that affiliation, I believe, which is a new kid on the block, and they've already hit the ground running. Groundwater is really becoming a very critical issue in Southern Africa because of the status of water security. So a lot of mining is happening, and a lot of shared aquifers that need equitable management as well. And in this, you still find that these are implementing partners that I'm talking about, among others. But there's a lot of funding that comes in, supported by the institutions mentioned earlier, including the Germans through GIZ, USAID, the World Bank, the GTIS, that's the Dutch, AFDB, and many other partners. I can't exhaust them all here. And most interesting, also DFID, which works a lot with creative region to build climate resilient infrastructure around our water resources. So at this stage, I just want to pose again for questions. I want us to ponder on a few points of reflection. One being, that we comparatively have a solid regional institution in terms of what really the kind of support and oversight that gives to the region, compared not just to other parts of Africa, but globally. I think we have some very competent and solid, institutions that enforce water cooperation. I also want us to consider the big role that we find from the support that comes from the ICPs, the international cooperating partners, and the implementing partners as well. I want us also at this point in time to understand that within SADC, we still have some way to go in terms of groundwater and the shared aquifers. I wish there was some space to bring someone from SADC GMI just to give an overview of this, but they have a lot of this information on their website as well. But I'll pause here for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tariro. There are a couple of raised hands, but I'll have to go with the first question that came in from Tomani. I'm going to unmute you, Tomani, so you can quickly ask your question to Tariro, and then is Remy also with a raised hand. So Tomani first. I'm going to unmute you now. Thank you. You can ask your question. Tomani, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Yes, clearly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Tariro, for the informative presentation. My name is Tomani Manungfala. I'm calling from Cape Town, and I am a researcher at Parliament with the Portfolio Committee on Water and Sanitation. My question relates to RBOs. In fact, it's well publicized that insofar as their effectiveness in terms of implementing the strategies under the SADC revised protocol is a bit limited and challenged, partly because of issues of capacity, as well as perhaps maybe resources. So what I would like to know from your side and with your experience that because you are involved in the region and you have got hands-on knowledge of these institutions, what are the challenges, and is this assertion true that the RBOs are not as effective as they're supposed to be? Thank you.
Thank you, Tumani. Do you want me to respond to this now, Clara, or?
Yes, please. It's a very specific question, so go for it.
Okay. Tumani is putting me on the spot here, so let me answer this as diplomatically as I can. When you look at the decentralization of water institutions, it is true that we have had a lot of challenges in the region, but it is not entirely accurate to say that they are not effective. I'm saying this because the experiences vary with countries. If you go to Mozambique, for example, where we work a lot with the regional water administrations, with Aracendro, with Arasu, with Aranote, you realize that these catchment councils are doing a lot of work. They've been established for some time, and the capacity, though it may not be exactly where we want it to be, has been growing over the years. You'll find the same thing when you go to, for example, Zimbabwe's catchment councils and sub-catchment councils. If you go to Tanzania, it's more or less the same situation, for example, with Mozambique. So the assertion is not entirely accurate, but it's not false either. It is true that we have a lot of challenges. And for example, I know you may have been talking about this with reference to South Africa. In South Africa, yes, there was a time when we needed to have 19 catchment councils, now reduced to 9, and having a constant revision of the strategic plan around how best do we establish them. So just to get to a point, what are the challenges? The challenges, in my view, one of them is the historical legacies we're trying to deal with. For example, in South Africa, when you go to a province like Limpopo, like Mpumalanga, where a lot of the licensed water uses have already been allocated to a lot of commercial uses, changing that, you find that the government need to consider a lot of things, including the economic impact, including the jobs, including food security and so forth. So it's not something you can change within a year or overnight. So this is one of the things that come in. In regions where most of the licensed water uses still really have a lot of allocations available, the challenges will be different. But one other thing is that because historically a lot of the water licenses were tied also to land title. So you find that a farmer, for example, we had 1,000 hectares of land, also had some water license. And if we are going to do any kind of water allocation reform, it has to actually work in tandem with the land reform. And because land reform happens under a different department, sometimes the processes don't really talk to each other at the pace that we need them to. So you get to a situation where land reform happened and Tumani gets a farm, but he still does not exactly have the water to use on the farm because, legally speaking, he doesn't have, authoritative access to it. So the decentralized institutions are dealing with these kind of challenges. And one last example, for example, in Zimbabwe, where the catchment councils and sub-catchment councils have been built, working very well for some time, then we had a massive nationwide land reform that really tilted the ownership of that land, and the people who were making up the catchment councils were replaced, overnight by different people whose capacity to deal with this was not exactly the same with the people who have been using the water for the past 30 years. So now, again, the government now have to get into deliberate and long-winded approach to build this capacity with these new owners of the land and users of water. So these are the challenges that we will be going through in the region, I think for a little while longer, but in the end, I think we're getting there. It was a long answer, but I hope I answered you somewhere.
Thank you, Tariro. I think you're right. There is, Tumani, a bit of a mismatch between what the RBOs are tasked to do and what the reality of water management on the ground is, for many of the reasons that Tariro has pointed out to. And also, you know, a river basin organization by its very nature is sort of an extension of the different countries that lend their officers to it. So the members that form part of the decision-making body of the River Basin Organization are only as effective as they are mandated to be by their own government. So if they have a sort of independence in making decisions, in making commitments and things like that, then yes, it can work as a commission. But if there still has to be a back and fro with national government before reaching a decision, then it becomes lengthy, and then it becomes probably less slim that one would want it to be. I know that in our midst there is somebody that works for River Basin Organization. So if you would like to, I'm not going to name you, but if you would like to make an intervention from an RBO perspective from Southern Africa, you're welcome to yourself. I see that, Tumani, have we answered your question? Would you like to have a follow-up? And then I think I'm going to give the hand to Nelly, because it might be an intervention that relates to this point. Tumani, have we answered your question?
I think he's muted.
Yeah, no, it's not muted, but for some reason the microphone doesn't reach. While we wait for him, Nelly, I'm going to mute you. Nelly Bozibore, do you have an intervention to make on the point of the RBOs?
Sorry, yeah, thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, so sorry, no, I don't have any suggestions or interventions, but it's an additional question to the River Basin organizations. I'm Nelly Bosibori, and I'm speaking from Nairobi, Kenya. We are having similar challenges regarding, well, we used to call them catchment advisory committees, and we are just in the process of, giving these river basin organizations more authority and autonomous for them to be able to make individual decisions and, in terms of just improving their governance. But from a financing perspective, I'm curious to know what success stories there are, or what financing approaches have been used in the Southern Africa region to ensure that these river basin organizations at least are able to raise funds to self-sustain their activities, because it's one of the major challenges that we're having here in Kenya. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nelly. Do you want to answer?
I will respond to this in part. Firstly, because in terms of actual success stories, we don't exactly have many to crow about yet. This is an evolving issue, and the water use associations or the catchment councils are kind of faring differently. I can pick a few examples like Ingomati in South Africa, where a lot of the water users are licensed through the catchment council. So the catchment council collects levies, one, and there's also this drive in Ingomati and other places to really implement the economic water uses in terms of payment for ecosystem services. So you're not just looking at water users who should be paying something to the catchment councils, but also other, key stakeholders in the basin who make use of water-related activities. It doesn't matter if this is consumptive water uses or non-consumptive. At this point, I think most of these bodies that we work with still receive some kind of grant from government, or what we call voted funds, because in terms of autonomy, they are not at the point where at a national level or at even at a transport level, they're able to stand on their own. It helps where there's infrastructure that water users can actually pay for. For example, in the Ingomati, you have 2 big dams and a lot of sugar farming. So when you look at this and you look at how much the sugar farms pay in terms of levies, in terms of license fees, it goes a long way in keeping the catchment council afloat. And this becomes very different in a situation where the entire catchment council is made of subsistence users and a few commercial interests here and there. I hope there's someone on the call who is from such a catchment council where they have some tips on how, how the financial part can really be implemented.
Thank you, Toriro. Thank you very much. I think, yeah, that's as much as we can give in terms of the answer, because we don't know exactly the ins and outs of funding of that. And I do not see the representatives of the RBO, but if anybody else knows more about funding the RBOs and sort of looking at financial sustainability, please do make an intervention. In the meantime, I see we have a question from John Ginny, but Remy from Geneva, he had a question and a hand raised earlier on. So Remy, I'm going to unmute you. You're welcome to ask your question.
Thanks, Clara. Toriro, can you hear me?
Yes, well. I can.
Terrific. Thank you so much for your presentation thus far. Really informative, and I'm really enjoying it. My name is Remy Kinner. I work for the Secretariat of the Convention of the Protection of Use of International Transboundary Rivers and International Lakes, based in Geneva, Switzerland. And my question is really to just get your feeling from the global dimension supporting the regional and national and local dimensions of water governance. As you said in your slide earlier, the SADC revised protocol was revised in order to bring it up to date and in line with the 1997 Watercourses Convention. The 1997 Watercourses Convention is one of now 2 global water conventions operating at the global scale, in line with the convention that I work for, the Secretariat. And I just wanted to get a feel from you, given that the 97 Watercourses Convention essentially, or the SADC revised protocol, mirrors the 1997 Watercourses Convention, and both global conventions are now being promoted by the UN Secretary General as being codifying international water law principles and a global platform for transboundary water governance. What do you see as the reason for some of the limited uptake and accession to both conventions within the SADC region? And also, how do you see that the global conventions could better support RBOs and treaties within the region? Because I think SADC is a great exemplar region for a region that is, proliferating with its transboundary water agreements and also basin organisations. And yeah, I would like some insights into how, at least from the global perspective, there could be added value.
Okay, thanks, Remy. I actually just want to give you a very quick and direct response to one of the questions on how to make, or why maybe there's slow uptake. I think because the conventions mostly, are guiding documents and they facilitate a lot of this cooperation. What we find is that the how-to part now is really context specific. And one good example is on water allocations in this region. We have a lot of discussions around in basins like the Okavango, in basins like Pungu and Sawe, where you want to talk about water allocation, then you realize that, okay, yes, there's no way you can really allocate water, the physical resource, equally or equitably. So you have to go beyond that and think of the benefits. And then how do you make the benefit sharing equitable? So in terms of the availability of tools to actually do those things, I think that's where a lot of the capacity is not really where we need it to be. I'm hoping there's someone from the SADC Secretariat on this call who will come in later. And another typical example, in IUCN, I've been working in the Pungu Sawe basins. I'm going to present that case study shortly, very briefly, where again in water allocation, the two countries were very happy to incorporate some of these provisions in this from these conventions. But then they said, look, we actually want to make the water allocation in the river sharing agreement very useful, but we don't really understand how to do the ecological flow assessments effectively and sustainably. What do we need? And then we actually had to go into a training phase and say, look, this is the kind of support we can give you, which we are still giving. It's really going a long way in helping, but in my assessment, we actually are going to need more than that. So these are some of the challenges that come in. So it's not that you find that the member states they don't exactly understand the conventions of the purpose. I find that in most cases they really do, and they really want to comply with them because they understand both the logic and the science around it. But the actual tools on how to go about doing it is what really causes this, the slow uptake. I hope someone from SADC is here to actually add to this response.
Thank you very much, Tariro. Remy, I hope that partially answered your question.
Yes, thanks, Tariro. I mean, I can continue the conversation further offline, but thank you for those insights. Very, very useful.
Thank you.
Tariro,
would you like... Sorry?
I'm saying to Remy, it's very good if you can reach out and, work. I don't know where you're working in the region at the moment, but to actually, because that's one area that I think is also very important in the region in building this capacity to make sure that, these conventions and the provisions are adhered to is something that is really needed in the region. Is something that we are also very ready to support if and when we get, other partners to come in.
Thank you, Tariro. I think you may continue.
Thanks, Remy.
Yeah, thank you. I think you may continue with the presentation for now because we have half an hour left of blocked time for all the participants in the session, and then we can pick up this and maybe other points like that from John in the next break. Thank you.
Okay. Because of time, I'm just going to briefly run through one typical SADC transboundary basin. I chose this one because these are three relatively smaller basins that are adjacent and are shared by two countries, Zimbabwe and Mozambique. So this is Pungwe, Save, and Uzi basins. So they are most normally collectively referred to as Pubusa. So these are basins that are very interesting in the sense that you're looking at a tribe basin city that covers, rather an institution that covers the all three basins signed by Zimbabwe and Mozambique under the Joint Water Commission, and then they went on to sign individual basin cities. And this you find a lot of natural hazards in these basins, droughts, floods. This is also where we had the world famous cyclone Idai not a very long back. It's also an area of growing commercial water uses, including mining and agriculture. A lot of pollution goes on, especially from agriculture. And as we speak, there's some saline intrusion from the sea along the Pungwe water course. I think it's coming up 80 kilometers already into the mainland. There's also a massive groundwater exploitation, especially down in the Save Basin. And right now, there's a lot of work going on institutional strengthening and building a tribe basin authority. And this is really being helped by the, by the regional framework that SADC established. So the Joint Water Commission was signed in 2002 as an agreement that Zimbabwe and Mozambique need to equitably share these water courses. And one very interesting thing about this, there's a very encouraging amount of cooperation going on, even before and during, the establishment of the formal platforms for cooperation. In 2016, and only in 2016, was there a treaty between the two countries on the Pungwe Basin. And last year, a treaty came up, which was also ratified on the Uzi Basin. Currently, the Save Basin treaty is being negotiated, is almost finalized. And then there are also discussions around the tribe-based institutions and the hosting agreements that are going on now. And IUCN and other partners involved in this process. So the institutions are very much informed by the SADC water policy and this strategic action plan. And in tandem with SADC, there's a basin roadmap already, which aims to achieve, all this, the cooperative institutions and stakeholder participation. And there's a lot of support that is coming in, and you always find a lot of support coming in SADC. Some came in fact, a lot of it came through the Pungo phase 1 and 2 that was supported by the Swedish SIDA institution, and a lot of funds were also, given support by the FDB and DFID through CREDIF. Right now, as the IUCN, we are working under our BRIDGE program. BRIDGE stands for Building River Dialogue and Governance. And yeah, well, I think this talks to the shirt that I'm wearing this time. I hope we can all see it. In 2018, the GIs and DFID we're also working through SADC to support a lot of stakeholder participation work that is going on there, that is now taken over. I think I would rather say that is receiving further support now from the Resilient Water Program that is supported by USAID through Chemonix International. So within this particular basin, one of the interesting things is that the two basin management agencies that you find in both sides of the border, Arasendro on Mozambican side and Zilwa South Catchment in Zimbabwe, have been working together so well. And despite all these challenges, and despite not having an RBO yet or secretariat yet, a lot of work has been achieved already. And this, there's a lot of platforms for cooperation that exist. And you actually find that the technocrats who are involved in this cooperation are people who are on a first-name basis and share a lot of information, even not always through the formal channels. I just wanted to give out that that case study to emphasize the point that while in SADC we have a very good enabling framework, cooperation itself has never been much big of a challenge. I think because of a lot of historical ties around the region. Also, where I said earlier, the unwitting support that the Scramble for Africa created, because you keep finding people with shared cultures across states. So building trust is not a very difficult thing among states. There is a project called Daphne, I think is coming to an end now, which is done in the Zambezi Basin. And they produced papers on how the idea of building trust becomes important in transboundary cooperation. And they find that in the 8 states that share the Zambezi, one of the things that are very important there is trust is very much shared among the middle and lower basin, and to some extent also the upper part of the basin. So much so that all the help that has been coming in through the conventions, through the international support, has been very easy to put to use. I just want to quickly talk about the opportunities ahead and the kind of challenges that we have in the region, given that we have this can I say functional cooperative environment. So I'll just give a current status and future outlook because of time. All the basins are covered by some kind of agreement or treaty. You may not, in some cases like Ruvuma, you may not find an actual treaty in place yet, but there's an MOU that is allowing the two countries to negotiate, and we are working in there with SADC and IUCN through the BRIDGE program to support. We have a lot of established stakeholder platforms, including SADC-wide ones like the SADC water dialogue that happens every 2 years, the SADC RBO framework, which actually holds a workshop also every 2nd year in the Zambezi. You also have the annual Zambezi Basin Forum, and in terms of capacity building, a lot of work was done through WaterNet, and WaterNet actually sponsored a lot of postgraduate studies, which sponsored some government officials. This has been going on for over 15 years. I think it's 20 years now. So it's very encouraging because this training cohort is actually offered at a regional level. So you will find academics and government people that are given a scholarship coming in to be part of one class and go through the 2-year master's program together. And after that, when it becomes time to have some kind of discussions, you find that, for example, we are dealing with the Orange River, the South African delegation and the Lesotho delegation, 2-3 people who have been classmates before. So this has really been able, has facilitated a lot of efficiency and trust in terms of the cooperation that we're talking about. And although the groundwater issue is still coming up now, great strides have been made by the institution, like I alluded to before, and some capacity building courses are going on. And SADC GMI is also, involved in putting out this groundwater repository for the whole region, which will encompass all groundwater data in a harmonized fashion. In the end, I believe that's one of the aims. And from this background, I want to say we still have some challenges with urbanization, population growth that is going to need a lot of water resources. With the climate-induced weather extremes, including flood. And one of the things that came up from the discussion we're having, like you saw, a lot of dependence on ICPs. It's great that this has been coming in for the past 20 to 25 years, and it's well needed. But going forward, some demonstration of internal capacity, political commitment to shared water cost governance will be very critical in the success of water cooperation. There's a vastly different capacity level in terms of the effectiveness of human, financial, and technological resources to address water. So you have 16 or so member states. What you find in one country is not exactly what you're going to find in the other country. It's something that the region is trying to address. We are not there yet, but the progress is encouraging, and sooner or later, I'm sure we'll get there. I'm sure we'll get there before we hit the water scarcity, critical water scarcity levels that have been predicted actually to come into the region by 2050. That said, I just wanted to let colleagues on this platform that we it's not all doom. We have plenty of opportunities. There's some transfrontier conservation going on, heavily promoted, which is looking at the shared conservation across states, and plays very well with the shared water basins in terms of proximity, in terms of the governance structures and so forth. And we find that most of the landscapes where this is happening is also where you have the shared water courses. Like in the Limpopo, we have the Great Limpopo Transfrontier Park. In Zambezi, we have the Kavango called Kaza. And in each case, you have 3-4 countries there that already have some negotiating and cooperation, background on the water side. So this kind of strengthens this and refocuses energy along transfrontier conservation, which will then include water. And the climate-induced emergencies are really bringing the kind of political attention that the sector really needs. And because we have these institutions at the regional level that are maturing, that are actually crafted in accordance with international conventions, we are in a space where we have some great opportunity to work with partners globally to strengthen water cooperation in the region. And we have a very networked region, which I said before, where you have people that really know each other. I can hardly walk into any SADC water platform doesn't matter which country it is in, and not know at least 80% of the people in the room. It doesn't matter that people are coming from governments or coming from the ICPs or from other NGOs. Anyone who has been working in the region for more than 5 years realizes this sector very well. And because we are coordinated at SADC level, these discussions keep going on, and this is one of the saving graces that we have in the future. So how are we helping in IUCN? We have a water program that is working in the region, and which really focuses on strategic areas, water governance, in the investment, natural water infrastructure, water for development, and knowledge development. You will remember that the IUCN recently launched its nature-based solutions, global standards, something that you're also trying to bring into the water sector in the region. I won't explain this because we're short of time, but I'll be very happy to follow up on what we are doing and where. But we are very much poised to respond to a lot of priority issues in the region, including the climate risks, the gender, and the indigenous populations. We are working in the Pungwa Sawebusi Basin. We're working in Lake Malawi at the moment. We have worked in the Orange River Basin and in the Okavango Basin, and we will keep working in other basins. We have projects that are coming in, and we hope that our presence in the region actually goes, a lot further. Working with other partners, of course, to keep this cooperation going on. And this is the Bridge program, which is one of the projects through which we work in our IUCN water program. And Bridge aims, at increasing capacity to implement national transboundary water governance. So Remy was asking about, these conventions not taking shape and so forth. This is one area where we have a good for collaborations to keep working in the region. And, we are supporting, for example, the Tri-Basin Institution building in Pubusa and the improved watershed management that has been happening around, especially in Tanzania and in Mozambique. I don't want to put too much time on this. You will find most of our work in the water program and about Bridge on the IUCN website. So in a nutshell, I just want to say, SADC, in my opinion, water cooperation is encouraging. It's going on. It's not perfect yet, but I think we are taking the correct steps to be where we should be. And we require, some more capacity to make sure that we reach the perfection that we do, especially on tools that we have to use in executing benefit sharing, in executing water diplomacy. We do have some of the tools under our Bridge banner in IUCN and in our nature-based solution standards, and welcome partners who want to work with us on this. And I think, in terms of opportunities, we really are poised to do more work. So the kind of interventions that are required within SADC, compared to other parts of Africa, and I believe in other parts of the region around water cooperation, are really now on the how-to part, because we do have some established platforms for cooperation. We do have some very good stakeholder participation processes. We do have national water policies that speak to watershed level management, and we do have a level of willingness among the key stakeholders, including a growing commitment within the political government. So this is the end of the discussion. I hope I managed to make some justice to your time, Clara. But yes, at this point, again, I think we can have some more questions.
Thank you very much, Tariro. Yes, you've done a lot of justice both to the content and to the topic of today's discussion and to the time. I think your last couple of slides have partially answered a question that came from John Dinney. But John, I see you wanted some more specific in terms of impact on specific economic sectors. So I'm going to unmute you so you can ask your question directly to Tariro. You should be able to speak now, John. See if it works. Yeah.
Thanks, Clara. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
I can hear you, John, yes.
Great. Thanks, Tariro. Thanks for that presentation. I really enjoyed it. And the thing that I was curious about, a lot of what I'm reading about, you know, the kind of success factors around transboundary water management in Southern Africa kind of tracks back to the existence of a regional economic community like SADC and nesting the transboundary water management function within SADC and you know, the protocol as a SADC instrument. You know, and one of the benefits that's been put forward around that is it potentially enables better integration of transboundary water management with transboundary management of other natural resources. So things like agriculture. I mean, you spoke about conservation in your case study, trade, tourism, things like that. So other sectors that are also either have an impact on water or are dependent on water. And I just wondered if we're seeing any evidence of that in the region, you know, in the operations of SADC, whether we're seeing a good integration of transboundary water into transboundary management of other resources.
Okay, thanks, John. Clara, do you want me to go, or do you have the other questions first?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks, John, for this question. Actually, I think of it more as an opportunity at this point in time. A few weeks back, we were giving another webinar with SADC where this came up as well. In terms of integration, yeah, to be frank with you, I think this has not been happening before. It has only started coming onto the table recently. I think because of two reasons. It's because when you look at the other things like agriculture, like protected areas and so forth, they fall within different government departments. And even at the SADC Secretariat, they fall within different units. So these units have been working in silos for a good amount of time. But recently, this has come up, and in the Limpopo at the moment, where the Limpopo Water Course Commission, it now has more relations with Great Limpopo Transfrontier Park, and there's some ICPs who are willing to support this, including the European Union. And then you see a similar situation in the Casa Transfrontier Park. So at this point, these are still very much discussions about integrating this, and we can't say at this moment there's evidence of it happening, but there's evidence of the discussions having begun to take place and the intentions really getting stronger and stronger to work at this level. And I agree with you, this is something we really need in the basin, because if we work on one resource, we are still going to come back to some landscape after working on water, then try to work on agriculture, then try to work on conservation and species, which becomes very inefficient. But I'm glad the thinking is now there at the regional level. And I can only hope, like I mentioned in the opportunities, that we all work together to get this done. And colleagues that are on the call, John is speaking, I think he's sitting less than a kilometer or so, I think, from me, and he's from the Water Research Commission. So there's a very good opportunity for us to keep talking about this and for you to join the discussion. Thank you.
Very much, Tariro, and thank you, John, for the question. Just to confirm what Tariro has said, and also to add a little bit of a perspective from an other sectoral areas. I think traditionally, when we talk about conservation in Southern Africa, we tend to talk primarily about wildlife, sometimes forestry. The larger context would be land users and land ownership. but very rarely we put together the water. It's a bit like Tariro said, because of the departmental issues, but also because when we form people that are experts in conservation, water is not there. So it doesn't even feature. And it has been sort of coming out organically thanks to that element that Tariro very well highlighted, the fact that this region is very highly interconnected and networked. It is true that more or less we know each other in now also across the sectors, because we have to try and bridge through our sectors to understand better how we can work towards environmental quality, environmental health, sustainable development. So we kind of, as individuals, have to bridge across our own sectoral boundary. And so we try as we can to then bring more people in. So from a transfrontier conservation area at the SADC level, we are trying to engage more with water sector as well as agriculture. And the same goes from the water sector, trying to understand more about what happens in the conservation field. It helps to have international conventions like Ramsar, for instance. Ramsar is a water convention, but it's also a conservation convention. So it brings together the element of water quality for animal and ecosystem health. So it helps to have this kind of contextual elements. And it also helps to have increasing amount of regional programs from the ICPs of SADC, who are looking at integration and really looking at fostering this kind of multi-sectoral angle of environmental management, water management, to make sure that when we talk about a transfrontier conservation area, for instance, we don't forget that there's not much point in focusing on animal health if there is no water quality, for instance, or no water quantity, because that brings the life part of it. So programs like, for instance, the Resilient Waters or the Resilient program before that have done a lot in terms of helping this kind of bridging. And I think we have a couple of people representing the program online with us today, especially I think the Chief of Party is here, Kule. So Kule, if you have no objection, I'm going to put you on the spot here just to tell us a bit of how we use this kind of highly networked system that we have between the practitioners, the decision makers, and the different sectors, and try and bring it to life with new and innovative cross-sectoral programs. Kule, you are unmuted. The floor is yours. Thank you. I promise you, I have unmuted you. No.
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we can. Welcome. Thank you.
Oh, yes. Yes,
okay, sorry. Now, thank you and good afternoon, colleagues. Afternoon, Tariro. Thank you for a really great hour and a half. Let me firstly correct, I'm the partnerships advisor on the Resilient Waters program. And but no, it's great. Just I have the opportunity to, if I may, add to some of the questions that have been asked. Maybe to start with, Tomani, your question, which was about the capacity of some of these river basin organizations. Our program, Resilient Waters program, is working very closely with the RBOs, particularly of LIMCOM and OCACOM, to build their capacity, both technically in terms of technical products, but also in terms of warm body staff that we have resourced the institutions with to enable them to meet their obligations. Then coming to Nelly's question about RBO financing, thank you for bringing in the examples from as far off as Kenya. We are working very closely with other partners in the region, and to Tariro's point about people, the nice thing in this region of Southern Africa is the camaraderie that exists between institutions, etc. And coming to his example around Pupusa, his organization, IUCN, is part of many including GWP, that are working together with ourselves as Resilient Waters to try and provide collective capacity to that Pupusa tri-basin institution. And obviously the support that we provide comes in many forms, but it does substitute as a form of providing financial resources which are much required, especially now as the RBO is still getting off its feet. So, but these examples exist elsewhere in places like Okavango, Okacom. We've got a lot of RBOs like UNDP, European Union, the CRIDF program, NGOs, even like the Nature's Conservancy, all providing their bits and pieces of support to help out the functionality of Okacom in that instance. So there is financing that is happening. I think where there probably needs to be more attention. Well, there is attention, but we can, as we appreciate our member states in the regions, budgets, we can probably do a little bit more work in terms of influencing the release of financing from the member states themselves to support the work of some of these transboundary institutions. But certainly there is no shortage of interest from the member states, neither is there a shortage of interest from other ICPs and NGOs that are working in some of these landscapes. And then to John's question about the overlaps between TFCA and RBOs, yes, indeed, there's a great deal of overlap there, and Clara articulated it very, very well. In the case of the GLTFCA, for example, as the Resilient Waters Program, we are working to help them to develop a transboundary water management strategy together with other NGOs and partners and the member states that are working in the GLTFCA. The GLTFCA also is a transfrontier conservation area that is smack in the middle of the Limpopo River Basin. So collaboration with LIMCOM is also going to be important. It's the same member states that are working, but just in two kind of geographic areas and thematic landscapes. And then also just to mention in terms of our work that we are doing to support the CASA TFCA, one of the big things that we're going into now is looking at helping them to do water quality monitoring. You'll appreciate that water quality is important not only for ecosystem health, but also for the livelihoods and industries and other kind of users of water that exist within these landscapes. And in the CASA TFCA, this is no different. So there are a lot of overlaps there, and I'm sure if there's need for any further information to be shared, I'm happy to share my email address through Clara, and we can share more information. But just to end on the point that Tariro has made extremely well, is that of the strength of partnerships. And just to commend also IUCN, your own organization, Tariro, who's involved with so many different types of work in these transboundary landscapes and working with a lot of partners. I know IUCN has got a BioPharma program, which is also working in these transfrontier conservation areas with ourselves and others. So just to say that partnership approach is very healthy in delivering our objectives to improve livelihoods and ecosystems health in this region. Thank you, Clara.
Thank you very much, Kule, for actually having put some more meat in terms of how the interconnectivity happens and how we are really trying to get more of it going, both in terms of programmatic, but also decision-making inputs. There is one comment and sort of contribution to the discussion from Iphigenia, who's talking about the European Network Natura 2000. Iphigenia, we are past the time for our workshop, but if people are staying on as usual, we're happy to continue for a couple of minutes longer. But can you briefly share with us the example of Natura 2000 and how does it compare to what you've heard so far from Southern Africa, please? I'll unmute you now. Thank you, Iphigenia. Just very briefly, give us an idea of how does it compare? Because you talk about it as a common sector connecting conservation and water.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Okay. I'm Iphigenia. I'm from Democritus University of Thrace, and acknowledging the valuable conversation and the valuable comment about how we can link the conservation issues with water issues. I would like to make this comment because the European network Natura 2000 deals with the conservation, the protection of protected areas in terms of their habitats, in terms of their species, something like that you mentioned about Ramsar areas, including also a lot of water, of aquatic ecosystems, let's say, or water-related ecosystems. So I think that it could be a very good and useful idea for a next discussion on how we could consider these two issues to find out, to figure out the common sectors. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Iphigenia. Yes, the Natura 2000 network is quite interesting, and it is a European program. So in many ways, it's a bit like a SADC-wide sort of program dedicated to conservation, which we kind of don't have in that respect because we focus on the TFCA sort of component in terms of conservation, although there is a larger directorate that looks into food, agriculture, and natural resources, and then we have a separate directorate for water. But I think if you could share with me, and then I'll put it as handouts to the group, some basic information on how the Natura 2000 network works, I think it would be a good lesson learned for us. What do you think, Tariro?
Of course, with pleasure.
Thank you. Tariro?
No, I'm saying yes, that's perfect. If you can share that, then we can always then link up after this. It's okay.
Okay, thank you. There is a question directed to Kule from Hugo from Award, but I think you can tackle this directly with him, Kule. So I'm going to pass it on to you on an email after this meeting, if that's okay. Let me.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Thank you. It's very specific on the Resilient Waters program. So if there are no more questions or comments on the presentation and on the discussion, I would like to thank Tariro very, very much for this very clearly very interesting and very innovative presentation on where we were in the region, where we are, and possibly where we're trying to go with the help of all the parties concerned, from the governments to the key stakeholders to the ICPs. So this was very important, and we're going to pick up on a lot of elements of this discussion in the last session in 2 weeks' time, when we're going to have a roundtable discussion. So if you're interested specifically in the Southern African scene, the last event in 2 weeks' time will be a roundtable discussions on how to boost the transboundary governance of water resources in Southern Africa, and how innovations like big data can help in this process, and how do we move forward from there based on the work of the collaboration that we have been working on for now close to 2 years, which is the transboundary big data analytics and transboundary water governance for Southern Africa. So I would like to thank all of you for your time today, for staying longer than usual or than expected. And we look forward to seeing you again next week, when James Dalton, who is the director of the IUCN Global Water Programs, will talk to us about a variety of case studies of transboundary water governance from different regions in the world that have specific issues of governance, conflict resolution, or environmental management that needed to be resolved, and how these were the processes were at least initiated to resolve such issues. So If you are keen to listen to that, please log in next week again at the same time on Wednesdays as usual to listen to John's presentation. Once again, thank you so much for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your day wherever you are. Thank you. Tariro, if you want to say your goodbyes, the floor is yours.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.